Hello, hello, hello. Welcome into Strategies for Living here on 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan, and I'm joined by my ace producer. We call him the ace of the airwaves because he keeps us flying high, low, and in between. Hardly ever wrecks us.
Hardly.
Rapid Ruben Wright.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening to you, sir. Let me ask a question.
Sure.
Are you the least bit psychic?
I don't know. Sometimes I get gut feelings. I think maybe if you count that, I'll get gut. If something's about to go wrong, I kind of feel it in my gut first.
Yeah. Well, have you got any feeling in your gut about where Carla is?
See, therein lies the problem. I heard she was coming in hot on two wheels, is what I heard.
Well, if you're on I-20 right now, folks,
Get out of the way.
Be forewarned. But it goes right into what we're going to be talking about tonight. You know, how many of us are psychic? And I don't know about you, but I honestly, and my guest, once he comes on, may have something to say about this because we've known each other a while. But honestly, there were many, many years in my life that I didn't believe in psychics. I truly didn't. And now I think psychics are kind of like, being psychic is kind of like penicillin.
Oh,
you don't have to believe in it; it just works.
Uh-oh.
You've been waiting for this. There she is.
Hello, everybody.
He's been waiting.
I've had
He is
my
been
finger on the
waiting.
trigger this whole time.
When I heard
coming in hot music,
when I heard it, there it was. Okay, so I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by somebody coming in on two wheels. It's like penicillin. You don't have to believe in it for it to work. And our life strategist today has a brand new book out. He's Dan Baldwin. He is the author of the Psychic Detective Guidebook, and we're going to talk about all things psychic this evening, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Strategies for Living. We are presented by CADA, the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse of Northwest Louisiana. Been helping individuals and families now for 60 years. You don't have to leave home to get treatment now. Go to CADANWLA.org. We're also brought to you by Jerry Anderson State Farm Insurance, by Learning RX, by Highland Place Rehab and Nursing Center, by Jacob's Well Inspirational Books and Gifts, and by Resilient House. Be right back to meet Mr. Dan Baldwin, the Psychic Detective Guidebook, this evening on Strategies. Got some on-the-job learning going on, don't we?
Me too.
Welcome back. Welcome back into 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. Welcome back into this edition of Strategies for Living. PLPC Carla McCormick, glad you could join us.
Why, thank you very much.
Marriage and family therapist David McMillan. Let's welcome to the program now Dan Baldwin, who is the author of Westerns and Mysteries and Thrillers, Oh My, short story collections and books on the paranormal. He's the winner of many, many local, regional, and national awards for his writing and directing film and video projects. And his paranormal works are The Practical Pendulum, A Swinging God, Find Me, as told to Dan Baldwin, They Are Not Yet Lost, and How Find Me Lost Me, a betrayal of trust told by the psychic who didn't see it coming. They Are Not Yet Lost earned the winner designation in the New Mexico-Arizona book competition, and How Find Me Lost Me won the winner designation in the Best Book Awards 2017 competition. And he's a ghostwriter and co-author of more than 60 books himself. Let's welcome to the program Mr. Dan Baldwin. You can't cough on the radio, Mr. Baldwin.
I need some penicillin, Dave. How you doing, my old friend?
I don't believe in it, Dan. I don't believe in penicillin. Does that mean it won't work? I can't be cured?
Wait, I'm slowly disappearing here. I'm fading away.
Welcome, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I love this new book, the Psychic Detective Guidebook. Wow.
Well, thank you. I've been doing it for about 18 years, and as you know from our earlier conversations, I'm kind of moving into the area of paranormal investigation.
Yeah.
And I'm not leaving psychic detecting completely behind, but my focus is shifting, and I thought, I've got all this experience, so maybe I ought to put it into a book so that other people can, if they want to, benefit from some of the things that I've done.
Well, what's a little embezzlement among friends, huh?
Exactly.
I
can't talk about that now. No names.
No names. Okay. All right. Well, that is the prologue. That's the title of the prologue of the book, after all. And but I think again, you make a great point there. You never know. You never know where this is going to lead, do you?
No, and yeah, if you think you know where you're going, you probably set yourself off on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
The thing to do is just keep an open mind and follow the evidence wherever it goes.
It's interesting, Dan, because you and I have known each other a long time, and
since the mid-70s.
Yeah, back. We were both knocking around the advertising and marketing and radio business back in the day. And I don't remember the exact timing when I learned of this other side of Dan Baldwin. I think it may have been over a cup of coffee and a piece of pie at Strawn's.
I believe so.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly. But
back in those days, I wasn't doing any of this. Like I said in one of my books, I'm a psychic on training wheels. I came to this rather late in life.
How did you come to it? What's the story? What's the scoop? Inquiring minds want to know.
Well, one of the strangest and eeriest experiences in my life, out of the blue. At the end of the day, being a writer, you're full of frustration. So at the end of the day, I walk around the block and kind of dump the mental trash from the day. And I was down at the little park all by myself, probably 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm not a clairaudient. I don't hear voices. But I heard clear as a bell the phrase, "Find missing children." And, I looked around. There was nobody there. There was no car driving by with the radio blaring. There were no windows open with the TV set blowing.
Yeah, you were all by yourself.
All by myself. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I kind of blew it off. But, for the next 3 months, that thought just was embedded into my brain. It would not let me go. And, I did, the normal thing eventually, show me the door, I'll walk through it.
Yeah.
And once I made that decision, I started, facing the problem, how do I find missing kids? I'm not a trained detective. I'm not on the police force. I'm not a junior detective or anything. I'm not a PI. And it just hit me that maybe I could do something with this psychic business. This is about 18 to 20 years ago.
Right.
I started hanging around psychic bookstores and meeting people, and eventually I discovered that I have a skill with pendulum dowsing. And then that led to meeting other psychics and started working cases. And, here it is almost 20 years later. I'm writing a book about it, or one of several books about it.
All right. Now, Carla just asked off the air, what in the world is this pendulum dowsing thing? So I took one out and I showed it to her. But we've got some people that are watching us on Facebook, so maybe I can do it to demonstrate. But we've got some people listening on the radio, Dan. So let's talk about what is this pendulum dowsing thing that you're talking about?
I think most people are familiar with the old witching stick. The Y-shaped willow stick where the old farmer would go out and he would hold it above ground and it would turn down when he was over the water that he was looking for.
Right.
It's the same principle, but instead of using a Y-shaped stick to pick up energy, I use a rock on a string.
Yeah.
And you hold the rock on the string, and you ask questions. And
so
a swing
you
to
might
the right would be a yes answer, and a swing to the left would be a no answer.
Yeah. So it's just yes no questions, right?
Yeah. It's tedious, but it's when it works, it's very accurate.
But I might ask, I'm holding a pendulum right now in my hand, and Carla's watching me.
Yes, I am.
And I'm going to say a statement out loud. My name is Dan Baldwin, and I'm not doing anything. I'm just holding the pendulum, and the damn thing's swinging. And now I'm going to say that my name is David McMillan, and I'm not doing anything, but you see what you see, right?
Yeah, I'll oversimplify the process, but basically when you've got that rock on the string in front of you, that occupies your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is looking at the rock, which frees up your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is therefore free and able to contact the higher power.
Mm-hmm.
And I will let you define the higher power however you want to.
Yep.
But the higher power provides the answers through the subconscious. And then the subconscious directs your conscious mind to move the pendulum. There's no magic in the pendulum. It's a rock on a string. It's responding to your the muscles in your hand.
Yeah, it's a form of muscle testing. There's something very physical going on here. We just, we can't pick it up, but the pendulum
but it's being directed by the higher power through your subconscious, and that's where the quote magic happens.
Right.
And when it works, I like it because there's when I was doing other forms of psychic work, like the tarot cards or scrying, crystal ball gazing or whatever, there's always interpretation involved.
Mm-hmm.
And where I would get in trouble would be, the interpretation of the image that I was getting. The image is always correct, but your interpretation is what can get screwed up. So with the pendulum, it's yes or no.
Yeah.
Dan, how did you even get interested in this? What was the first thing? So you heard the voice in the park, but then how'd you go from that to, the next step?
Well, again, I started started out as a student, going to different psychic bookstores and meeting people and learning from people, and eventually, several of them got together with me and said, Dan, you've got the skill, you've got the talent, and you really need to. You need to start doing this. So we started working cases together. We'd meet at the library or at the bookstore or someone's house, and we would work cases.
Now, when you say work cases, some of those cases, the various police departments, whether they be city police or county police, sheriff's departments, would reach out to a group of psychics. Usually as a last resort, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
one of the reasons I wrote the book, one was the primary reason was to show people who were interested in becoming psychic detectives how it works, how you could do it, things that you need to do, things that you need not to do, But I also wanted to make a statement to the police force to consider vetted psychics as first responders. In other words, the police will take an anonymous tip from anybody, right?
Right.
Why shouldn't a psychic who is working, dedicating his or her life to finding the answers, not be given the same amount of respect?
Can anyone learn this skill? Do we all have an ability within us, Dan?
I'm firmly convinced that everybody has psychic ability. It's like anything else. Everybody has it to different levels. And it's like any other skill. You can develop it, and you can develop additional skills, but it all depends on how hard you work at it and whether or not you want to work at it.
So it's
like I said, for me, I tried several different avenues before I settled on pendulum dowsing.
Right.
And that's the one that seemed to work for me best.
But
anybody can do it.
So it may not work. In other words, what you're saying is we've all got the ability, but we've got to find our instrument, if you will. Maybe
right.
it's the for some, maybe it's the tarot cards. For some, maybe it's the pendulum. For some, it may be just simply going within, and you may hear or see things that other people don't experience.
In the book, I've got interviews with some of the top international psychic detectives, around the world. And you've got some people dream, some people throw cards, some people just meditate and they get messages. It just depends on. It's kind of a trial and error thing, and you find out what works best for you, and then you practice that skill.
We're going to.
You may not be good at the trombone, but you may be great at the piano. The more you practice the piano, the better you're going to become.
There you go. We're gonna talk about some of those psychic detectives that you've talked to. Going to talk about some of the cases that you've been involved in. The Psychic Detective Guidebook. Mr. Dan Baldwin, our life strategist today, here on Strategies for Living. Addiction takes a toll. Welcome back. Welcome back into 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Marriage and family therapist David McMillan, PLPC Carla McCormick, the author of many, many books, including the brand new Psychic Detective Guidebook. Mr. Dan Baldwin, our life strategist this evening here on Strategies for Living. So, man, you get our attention right from chapter 1, Dano. So many people will remember, even if they don't remember all of the details of this case, J.C. Lee Dugard.
Yeah.
And that case was a very, very interesting case. And you were actually, you and some of your psychic buddies were, really credited with breaking that wide open, right?
Well, we weren't credited with it. One of the things you need to learn if you want to become a psychic detective is don't go into it for credit because you're not going to get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you know that
But,
you
yeah,
help.
You have to do it for the satisfaction of knowing you help solve a crime or find a missing person.
Yeah, and we're J.C. Lee Dugard was this was over 18 years.
Yeah, she was missing. She had been kidnapped by a couple, and for 18 years, virtually everyone thought that she was a murder victim early on.
Right, because
several of us got involved in the case. Again, 18 years later,
she was abducted at 11.
We filed our reports with the FBI. In fact, the FBI actually requested our participation at that time, and several of us got that she was alive. She was alive and well, but she was still in captivity. That she knew who she was, and we got some general locations. And in fact, I was even able to douse a description of where she was being held.
All right, now how did you do that? Because Carla asked a second ago, how you use the you do a form of dowsing with the yes/no, but you also do map dowsing, right? Location dowsing.
Yeah, you can douse locations with a map, and that's one of the skills, and I'm fairly good at that. But on this case, I was wrong on the map and right on the other area, which is another thing. You're not 100% right 100% of the time. Nobody is.
Right.
But in this case, I was able to douse by asking questions. Is she in a house? No. Is she in a building behind the house? Get a yes. Is the house? Does it have a flat roof or a pinnacle roof? Yes or no, and so on and so on. And I was able to get a description of basically the backyard where she was being kept. And the psychics get no credit, and that's understandable. But the case was dead for 18 years, and after the psychics got involved, the case was solved. So you put two and two together.
Right. But
we'll never get credit for that, and that's you've got to go into it understanding that.
Right. So basically the psychic detective work broke the case wide open 18 years later.
That's what we think.
Yeah.
And the timeline to me proves it. I mean, it was dead for 18 years. We got involved. It was solved. She was rescued.
Wow. That's pretty awesome.
I have a question, Dan.
Happens, yeah.
How do they let you be involved? I mean, how do you find out the facts of the case to know, the beginning of the case to know where to go? Do you just hear about it on the news, or do you have friends within the police department?
As a general rule, I only get involved in a case if the authority in charge invites me in. In other words, it could be the FBI, the local sheriff, the local police, the Forest Service, the Bobbies over in England or wherever. I don't pick up the newspaper and pick out a case and start working on it.
What are the main qualities that if you're going to be and do psychic detective work, what are the basic qualities that you have to have, Dan?
Well, there's a long list of them, but heading the list, of course, you've got to have one psychic ability, and you've got to be willing to devote that to the task at hand. You've got to have stamina because it's very, very trying work. For a lot of psychics, it gets very emotional. In other words, if you're someone who has a lot of intuition, you may actually experience the rape or the murder of the victim.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't handle that.
Yeah.
You've got to have curiosity, natural curiosity. Otherwise, you won't be able to ask the right questions. You've got to be able to have a strong sense of yourself, because some of the time you're going to be wrong, and you've got to be able to say, well, I was wrong this time, but I'm going to be right next time, and you've got to keep plugging away at it.
Yeah.
You also have to have a certain amount of social skills, because you need to be interacting with hardened police officers.
How do you handle the self-doubt when it comes in?
You just have to, again, you got to believe that overall you're doing good work, and that you're going to continue to do good work, that you're contributing something to society. And it's like anything else. You're going to have bad days, you're going to have good days, but you've got to concentrate on the good days. I'm doing good work, I'm helping people, and overall the world is going to be a better place because I'm involved and because of what I'm doing.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned was stamina, and I guess patience. Again, this is not all glorious stuff. This is just sometimes the cases that you've worked on. Have you kept up how many cases, Dan, through the years that you've worked on?
Oh, no, I haven't kept a tally at all.
You think it's over 50? You think it's over 100? What are you thinking?
Definitely. Sometimes we'll be working. I work 4 or 5 cases a month. So you add that up over 18 years. It's a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But I don't keep tallies.
Yeah.
Something else I need to point out: if you're doing psychic detecting work, you've got to do something I call accepting dots, and that means chances are any psychic detective is not going to come up with 100% of the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
You're going to come up with a piece of the puzzle. You're going to come up to 1 or 2 dots in the dot-to-dot puzzle. And you've got to accept the fact that, although you may not solve the crime, you may be providing a key piece of evidence or a key lead to solving the crime, and that's okay.
Again, you have to be tenacious. Do you pray about this?
Yeah, that's one of the steps. Yeah, definitely. I have a it's not a ritual, but I have a process that I do when I begin a psychic session, and one of those I call it praying in. And again, you pray into. I'm going to leave to your definition of what you pray to up to you, but I definitely pray in every session I do. Address the higher power.
Yeah.
Basically, you said, "Help me."
Yeah. So you kind of knock and the door will open, seek and you'll find type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get yourself clear? How do you clear out your own biases? And again, the connecting the dots, you got to be willing to. You may not get all the dots. You just get a few dots. You got to connect them. That's the detective part of this. How do you keep yourself clear to be able to do that?
The hardest part for me, Dave, is keeping a clear mind, unobjective. Because if you work in a case, in your heart, you want to find a little 5-year-old missing girl alive and well.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking that, your mind is focused on that, that's the answer you're going to get. That may or may not be the true answer.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is keep your mind totally clear and focused on coming up with the right answer and not the answer you want. And then for me, after the case is over, essentially I've trained myself to wash the case out of my brain. Because it gets to be too heavy to carry around with you.
Yeah.
The emotional baggage is too much.
You got to ask right first questions too. I learned from your book. Can I do this work now? May I do this? Should I do this?
Exactly.
Will I get accurate answers now? Is this work for the higher good? Those seem very practical, but also very respectful questions to me, Dan.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I was working a case of a missing little girl over in Texas. Excuse me. And I was honing in on her location. And I got down to the point where I was using, basically road maps to locate the town in which he was located. And then if I'd have gotten to that point, I would have gone on Google Earth or something and got the city plot and was working towards street address basically.
Right.
And boy, something in the back of my head kept saying, don't do this, Dan. Don't do this, Dan. Don't do this, Dan. So I stopped and took a deep breath and then addressed the higher consciousness and said, should I be doing this? And I got a flat swing left no.
Hmm.
And it turned out later, so I dropped the case. I pulled out of it.
Right.
And it turned out later that the apparently the adopted parents or the nearby relatives who were looking so hard and heavy for the little girl were more concerned about some insurance money that she was going to get into rather than the health and well-being of the little girl.
Hmm.
So I had to let that one slide.
We got a couple of minutes before break. I'm remembering a case that you told me about. Again, this is where tenacity comes in. And I don't remember all of the details of the case, but I remember you were looking for a missing person who unfortunately ended up, you found the person but wasn't alive. But I remember you saying, giving coordinates, and it was in a desert area, and you knew that the person was around there, but the search party had gone and looked, and they couldn't find because they were looking on the ground. You remember the case I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was up in Yavapai County, up in north of where I am, up in the big forest country. But we had I had doused the location, and several others had doused the general location, and we went up with a search and rescue team.
Right.
And get this is some of the fun part. The body was in a rattlesnake preserve. If you can believe that, we have a rattlesnake preserve up here.
Great, yeah.
So we're tramping around in the tall grass, and we're walking with the dogs, and the dogs are going nuts, and we found nothing. We walked on by, and towards the end of the day, they said, well, let's go back by that site where the dogs are acting crazy. And went back to the location. It was around a tree, and everybody's looking on the ground, and the dogs are basically jumping up in the air. Look up, look up, look up. And finally, one of us looked up, and there was the guy. He'd strapped himself into the top of the tree and committed suicide.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow.
But again, that's where the psychics, the sheriff's department up there had been by there and had done search and rescue and come up dry. And with the psychics being involved, we went right to them. It took a while because, doing search and rescue, you do a grid search, so it takes a long, long, long time.
Right.
But we went right to him. We found him.
You had to look up the psychic the psychic detective guidebook. Mr. Dan Baldwin, our life strategist, this evening here on Strategies for Living. The psychic detective guidebook available where you buy books, including Amazon. We'll be back with more Dan Baldwin this evening here on Strategies. Welcome back. Welcome back into 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Marriage and family therapist David McMillan, PLPC Carla McCormick, and our life strategist this evening, the author of his brand new book, The Psychic Detective Guidebook. He is Mr. Dan Baldwin. Are you scared yet, Carla?
I am a little scared. Dan, one of the questions I wanted to ask before we went to break was, do you ever get scared? Does this ever scare you?
Only when I've stepped up over a rattlesnake.
But I mean, the visions you have, or the feelings you have.
No, not me. One of the reasons I like the pendulum so much is that it's emotionally it's pretty non-trying. Although there have been times when I have been overcome by emotion. There are other members of my little group that have had to pull out because of the not because of fear, but because the emotional experience is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
What they see.
But no, I've done search and rescue, and searches, in the backyard of known murderers, and several times. I've done searches in contested gang territory, near skinhead camps, things like that. But I've never been scared. No.
One of the things
certainly not of the psychic element at all.
One of the things that you did in the book is you, in addition to telling your story and giving guidance for any of us who might want to open ourselves up to this, developing this part of us, you also talk to many successful psychic detectives in the book. You have interviews with them.
If it's okay, I'd like to mention their names here.
Yeah, I would love for you to mention some of them. And
part of the reason, rationale behind the book, I wanted to give different perspectives. And I know, I have personal relationships with some of the top psychic detectives around the world, just because, we've worked together on cases, and I've got to know several of them personally. So I wanted their perspective, and I sent out basically a list of questions and said, just fill in the answers with whatever you want. And I have not edited their answers one bit. So you get a pretty good perspective. But I've got, let me run through the names. Dwayne Brock, he's a friend out here in Arizona. Tammy Carpenter, she's up in Colorado. Jeanette Healy, she's over in France. Rhonda Hull is a good friend of mine down in southern Arizona. Patricia Mona, she's from up in Canada. Linda Newton, and Christopher Robinson. And Chris is over in England. So you get not only perspective from different people, you get perspective from different countries.
Yeah, from across the pond, too.
Yeah. So, these are practicing, working psychic detectives, and they're very good at what they do.
So, it may be unfair of me, but can you pick one of them? Maybe you douse which one you should. and maybe share a little bit of what you learned from them and what you share in the book.
Oh God, it's all. Well, it's hard to point out one specific example because you learn so much from working with these people. One thing I will say, one of the things that drew me to my new focus was my experience working with Rhonda Hull.
Tell us about
we
Rhonda.
wrote the book. We've talked about it before. Speaking with Spirits of the Old Southwest. Well, Rhonda and I got together working cases, and we became friends. And we discovered that she and her husband, Dwight, and I share a fascination with the Old West. And we started doing paranormal research, into ghost towns and ghost mines and the abandoned ranches and places like that. So that's an example where I have not only learned from my fellow psychics, I've also, transitioned into a brand new area.
And by the way, we should mention that's another book. And you'll be back with us here as a life strategist in mid-September. In fact, Wednesday, September the 12th. And we'll talk to you about speaking with spirits of the Old Southwest.
That's real interesting.
Yeah. So
But back to psychic detecting, again, I wanted to give a different perspective in the book so people can get not only my take on it, but they can also get the take of other people who are active, in the field right now.
What does the average police officer think of this work?
Generally, that depends on where you are talking to the average policeman. If you get one-on-one, they're pretty open to it. In fact, I rarely run into a police officer of, local, state, federal, whatever, who wasn't at least open to working with a psychic detective. The ones who I've worked with, some who said, in fact, this happened up not too far from here. I was working with doing it again, search and recovery at the time, with two deputies, and they both said, we do not believe in the psychic business at all. Said, but the information you have come up with is so accurate, and some of it has not been released to the public.
Right.
That we're out here, on our day off working with you. And if you address a policeman, in fact, just back when I was in Louisiana a couple of weeks ago, I was making a presentation at one of the Rotary clubs, and there was a policeman in the audience, and asked him if he believed in psychic business. He said, I'm open-minded, but probably not. And I said, well, do you believe in cop instinct? Well, of course. I said, well, then you believe in psychic ability. So if you put it on the level of, do you believe in cop instinct, which they all have?
Right.
Even if they don't believe in psychic experience, you have a level of understanding there that where you can reach them.
So
because
again,
they know cop instinct.
So again, it's a matter of what you label it. It's a matter of what
Exactly.
you call it. You know. So again, I don't mean any disrespect here, but many people might say, God spoke to me, and they may use that language. Well, did God in fact speak, or is that some psychic ability coming out? Is that some, communication? Again, as you said earlier, you take the conscious mind, the watchdog, out of the way, and let the unconscious mind, and perhaps what Jung called the collective unconscious or the superconscious mind, let it loose, and who knows what you're going to get.
Yeah, one of the things I caution against is when you're working with any police force, don't become a missionary for psychic detecting. Treat yourself as exactly what you are. You are an informant with information, and let your work do the talking for you. Don't try to convince them of the value of being psychic or what psychic detecting is about or what your skills are. Just say, here's the information, here's how I got it, please evaluate it, and if it's valuable, I'd like to work with you some more. But, don't be a missionary.
Yeah.
Straightforward, factual, in and out.
Dan, I still don't understand how did you determine that you were psychic? I mean, how did you, is this just something you were interested in and you kept investigating and one thing led to another, or is it some kind of gift that you had ever since you were a kid? I mean, how did you know?
Well, what I really knew about it was when the other psychics told me so. I said, Dan, you've got it. I started out because that was the only thing that I could do. I thought that to find missing kids, and I just started experimenting with it. And I was very, very conscious of my lack of experience and lack of practice. And it was through the encouragement of the other psychics that I became bold enough to continue doing it. Looking back, I can see throughout my life where the ability showed itself, but at the time I didn't recognize it. So again, I came to it late in life.
Do you ever ask yourself, how would my life have been different? How would my life have been changed if I had been able to do this back in high school?
No, not really. There's no use thinking about that.
Yeah.
I might have been burned at the stake,
Dan,
you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but you'll probably pay me to keep my mouth shut, and
Thank you.
people can.
Yeah, check is in the mail.
There you go, folks. You got to get this book. You got to check it out. The Psychic Detective Guidebook. Mr. Dan Baldwin will come back and wrap up our conversation with life strategist Dan Baldwin.
This is so intriguing.
Close your eyes, girl. Look inside, girl. Let the sound take you away.
Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Marriage and family therapist David McMillan, PLPC Carla McCormick, and our life strategist this evening, Mr. Dan Baldwin. Brand new book, The Psychic Detective Guidebook. Dan's real job is writing books, a lot of them for other people, some for himself. You can find him at danbaldwin.biz. If you want to know more about that, you can find his books wherever you buy books, including Amazon. If you go to your local Barnes & Noble, I'm not a bit psychic, Dan, but because I was at Barnes & Noble earlier today, they got a stack of your books signed by the author. So you know, you don't have to be psychic to get in. I saw a lot of copies of Spirits of the Old Southwest. So if you're interested.
If they don't have the Psychic Detective Guidebook, in store, you can definitely order it through Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Basically, any place you order your books, you can order it.
And I know you love to write fiction too. Let me tell you what a sick man this is, Carla. One of his titles is Sparky and the King. And you're old enough. You know obviously who the king is.
Yeah, Elvis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, do you remember who was nicknamed Sparky?
I do not.
Yeah. Jack Ruby.
Oh.
Yeah. So picture that in Shreveport, Louisiana, Elvis is giving a concert in Municipal Auditorium, and somebody's put a hit on him. And guess who comes to help save Elvis?
Really?
Yeah. He's a sick man.
It sounds like some of his psychic detective work.
You never know. You never know.
That was fun to write. I did a lot of research back into my old stomping grounds in Shreveport. That was fun.
Yeah. So
Jack Ruby spent a lot of time over in Shreveport looking, among other things, looking for girls out on the old Bossier Strip. Of course, Elvis got his start at the Louisiana Hayride, so
yeah.
it was a natural.
Yeah, I hope I can talk you into maybe doing some kind of sequel to the Spirits of the Old Southwest. Maybe we could set up shop at Municipal Auditorium, and maybe contact I don't know, Elvis and who knows who.
Well, as a matter of fact, I may be headed back there later in the year or early next year to do something along those lines. Maybe we could arrange that also.
I would love to talk about that.
I've already made arrangements for a couple of locations. I can't mention it right now, but you would be very familiar with the locations.
Can't
all
wait.
The places in Shreveport.
Can't wait to hear more, Dan. Thank you for being a great life strategist as always. Folks, you got to go get the Psychic Detective Guidebook.
Oh, get the book, guys. It's so interesting.
Yeah, Mr. Dan Baldwin. Folks, thank you for tuning into Strategies for a Living. We've been brought to you by CADA. We've also been brought to you by State Farm, Jerry Anderson, State Farm Insurance, by Learning RX, by Highland Place Rehab and Nursing Center, and by Jacob's Well Inspirational Books and Gifts, and by Resilient House. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call that you could make, who is it that you would call? What is it that you would say? And why are you waiting? Make the call for Dan Baldwin, for PLPC Carla McCormick, for Reuben Wright. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. See you next time on Strategies for Living.
Breaking news and trending talk. This is 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. KEEL, Shreveport.